Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this regular meeting of the El Paso MPO. Today is December 14, 2018. It is 9:05 p.m. This session is now in order. And also, I'd like to welcome Dr. Sam Morgan. Is he here today? Dr. Sam Morgan, welcome to the board. And if we could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, if you can lead us with the pledge.
We have 16.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Are there any public comments?
Yeah, we go.
Iver? There he is.
We need to remind them too about the Morgan.
Yeah.
For public comment, Mr. Iber?
Mr. Iver, can I have you for public comment?
Buenos dias. Good morning, everybody. It's good to see all of you again. I am John Iberg, a.k.a. Juanito Iberg, a.k.a. Biker John. I am retired, so I have been traveling. And I am a road user expert. On the 15th of September, I commenced my journey. I went over to specifically to Chiang Mai, Thailand. My daughter's teaching there. But what a great jumping off point that is for me to see the rest of Southeast Asia. And this time I did it from land instead of from the deck of a Navy ship 40 years ago. How different it is. I have to congratulate each and every one of you for the fine job you're doing with the roads. The roads in Southeast Asia are comparable. But when you hear people saying, well, you got to have the bike lane, you got to have a sidewalk, cut curb sidewalks, I do that all the time. I tell you that all the time. Over there, if they have the sidewalk, it's used for parking of vehicles. I mean, pedestrians basically use the road too. And that is what a road user is. A road user is anybody, whether you're motorized or non-motorized, whether you're using a wheelchair or you're walking or in an 18-wheeler, there'd be 24 wheels. All road users, and everybody uses the road. And believe me, when you're a pedestrian over there, there's very little room on the road. But, like being in Mexico, I felt safer, despite the fact that the roads are absolutely packed. Because the one rule is, and everybody follows it, is don't get into a collision. And I spoke with the person who is in a wheelchair. I said, how's this going for you? He says, oh, I'm much safer here than in the USA. He was from Pennsylvania. And he says, because the first rule everyone follows is don't get into a collision. Now, I did Google a little bit, check out what the accident rates and like that, because you know you're going to have problems when people are operating a motor vehicle with all that mass and the fact that you have so many people on the roads.
Mr. Iceberg, the 3 minutes are up.
Yes, ma'am. Let me wrap it up. Our roads are great. You're doing a great job with it, but when it comes down to it, it is the road user who bears the responsibility. It's not the construction of the road. It's hazardous here. Oh, well, the MPO is to blame for it. It is the road user. That is the bottom line, the road user. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. No.
Moving on to the rest of the agenda here, we do have item number 1, approve the motions and minutes for the November 16, 2018 Transportation Policy Board meeting. At this moment, I would entertain a motion to approve such minutes. I have a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Second. The motion has been seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. Abstentions. Motion carries unanimously. The minutes have been approved. Item number 2.
Discussion and action to approve recommendations from the Transportation Project Advisory Committee to the El Paso MPO's input on the use of $16,814,031 funds for the Volkswagen Environmental Mitigation Trust Beneficiary Mitigation Plan for Texas is to send a notice of concurrence to the Texas Commission of Environmental Quality, TCEQ, emphasizing that a competitive process should be followed and not a first-come, first-served process for the El Paso County priority area eligible mitigation actions, which are as follows. The first one, Class 4-7 local freight trucks, repower or replacement. Number 2, Class 8 local freight trucks and port drayage trucks, repower or replacement. Number 3, Class 7-8 refuse vehicles, replacement or repower. Number 4, school buses, repower or replacement. Number 5, transit and shuttle buses, replacement or repower.
Good morning. Greg McNichol, I'm chairman of the TPAC. I wanted to talk to you all a little bit about, this is an item that we're recommending to you. This plan has been developed by the Texas Air Quality, by the TCEQ, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. They are the ones that are going to administer the program. The dollars that have been collected on the Volkswagen settlement have gone to that agency for things. They have developed a plan. They shared it and sent it to the MPO office, asking us to provide input to their plan. I want to kind of make that so it's in final draft form, if you will. That we were allowed to make recommendations, and that's what we're presenting to you is what we're recommending that comes from this area. There are 4 areas in Texas that are going to get these funds, all of them in areas that are dealing with conformity issues like we are, okay? And so with that in mind, we focused on the mobility sources that are generating the most pollution as it relates to what this program could do. It's these 5 categories. And we also are looking for those that will bring better conformity to this area. And again, it's these 5 areas that are within their plan. I kind of go back and reiterate that. And so that's what we're recommending to you, be our recommendation to them. Again, like I said, we focused on the things that are related to the MPO. Questions?
Mr.
Go ahead.
Chairman, yeah. So the first come, first served process, is that currently not in place in the
Yeah,
state?
but they had the way the program reads right now, and Roger can talk to that in more detail.
Roger Williams, Interim Executive Director. Yes, what will happen in 2019 is there will be a process established. And in their plan right now, they say that there could be a first come, first serve, or a competitive process. So this is one of the things that the TPAC focused in on, and that they thought that a competitive process would be better than a first come, first serve process. So in 2019, what will happen is there will be an opportunity here in El Paso for competition between agencies or in private individuals. Trucking would be eligible for that. For example, companies that in that trade that we feel a competitive process would be a good way to go about doing that.
Okay. Just a follow-up question. I understand that federally recognized tribes are eligible to apply. Since we do have the Isla del Sur Pueblo, how, and they don't have a seat at this table, how do we approach the tribe, and are we applying, would we apply together, or how does that process work?
The process would be for the tribe to apply. We can coordinate and share information with them. This is not like federal funds that are allocated to the state or to the MPO and that goes through this body for approval. This will be independent. It will be through a grant process. The reason TCEQ asked for our input obviously is because we have, play a big role in air quality. So we're simply just making recommendations on how we think the funding should, and the areas where the funding should be distributed. And as Mr. McNichol was explaining, the reason that the TPAC chose these is because they are directly related to what we are responsible for in planning for air quality.
And Roger, you've reached out to the tribe to discuss this?
I have not reached out to the tribe, but we have membership on the TPAC, so the TPAC is, they are aware of it.
Great, thank you.
First thing I noticed, there's no grant money here for restoration of vintage vehicles. I'd like to know why.
Good question.
Oh. No, I have a real, this is kind of go to what my colleague was just talking about. I think it wouldn't hurt also to make these comments known to TCQ. As you know, Cesar, we, the legislature, didn't get to have a say in the division of these monies. And so it's, to me, it's a little bit controversial behind the scenes. Even though it's TCQ, there's a lot of pressure and comments being made by the governor's office. And I was asked to participate, and I did, but I think that was just to say that crossed the box. We had the chairman that's over TCQ in the meeting, but it didn't seem to make a lot of difference. So I would encourage persons at this table to make comments to TCQ and the governor's office, because I don't think it's completely settled yet. I think you've heard some of the stuff in the newspaper and even the backup information. There's areas that want the money divided just by registrations of the vehicles. And if you did that, I think we would not see the kind of dollars that we're talking about. And the bigger argument is that it shouldn't matter how and why this company got caught doing what they're doing when the settlement with the feds was to do with air quality, and you go to looking at where there's fixes needed in air quality, we come high on that list. So I think we need to probably reiterate that and push that back home. And there could be additional monies in the future too, because we're not even sure about the buyback process. We were talking before the meeting, we all know, I know somebody, others have known people who've been, who've settled, and the program goes through the end of next year still. So there's still a process out there for settlement on the vehicles themselves too.
And we spent probably an hour discussing this item. I kid you not. And a lot of it had to do, because at first we kind of were focusing on exactly how can we make things better. And the reality is we're making a recommendation as it stands right now.
Right.
Because we're not administering the program. We had to kind of circle back on that and realize it's not our plan, it's their plan. And they're asking us what we think of their plan. So I think input directly back to them is very much where it needs to go.
Because I don't want people to think that there's a dollar amount that we've already been given as a grant. TCQ is going to take all this under advisement, and they're going to roll out what they think they should do for the state as a whole. And they're getting a lot of comments, again, going back to the numbers on registration, and I think that's a bad way to do it, because it's not tied directly to that. That's just how they got caught.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, as Chairman Pickett has pointed out, it's going to be their decision ultimately. My question goes to these 5 classes of mitigation strategies. Are there others that we did not include here? I mean, what were our options?
There are others. If I remember right, there were 10.
Correct.
Okay? These are the 5 that are most focused on the MPO and the charge we have in dealing directly with air quality components. So that's why we're, again, trying to focus on what would do best for El Paso in our region.
What, if any, consideration is given to the air quality issue caused by Juarez, and whether or not, you know, that's in our plans to work with Juarez in trying to mitigate that ambient particles, you know, that come over to our side, and that contribute in some respects, Roger, to the non-attainment classification for El Paso.
In this case, what we're looking at here is for Texas, and one of my questions too is that, but also, you know, what is going on in New Mexico. But as far as what is, no, this is not part of this charge. And the way this was broken down is because, one, we're a priority area, along with some of the other areas. And I'd like to mention that we are not in non-attainment for ozone, but we're getting very close to
Right.
that. So that's one of the reasons we got allocated as a priority area. And one of the other things in how they figure out the funds is the pro rata allocation percentage of VW vehicles that are in your specific area, being in El Paso, because we are considered one of those areas that are in danger of going into non-attainment for ozone. Then they start looking at, well, what is the percentage of vehicles that are in your area? So there's actually about 6 or 7 here areas in Texas. TCEQ is taking the lead on that. Now, if there's something going on in other countries where that might be the case, and what is going to get an opportunity for this, I don't have that answer for you right now. I could find out more information on that. But this is specifically to Texas, and in this case, the $16.8 million is specific to how we in El Paso want to move forward with that.
Okay, and finally, I guess we have here in these classifications local freight trucks and such. Do we not take into account the trade trucks flowing through I-10? Is there any way to include whatever air
The-
quality?
Right. The way they broke this down, first there's eligible mitigation actions, and then they come back to, and it's all in your backup documentation, you can see on page 6, in a priority area, eligible mitigation actions. We're sort of boxed in. As far as external vehicles that are coming through, they're not eligible for this. It is region-wide, local vehicles, local freight, and in the case of that first one there is drayage vehicles too, that are a function of what's going on at the ports of entry. As far as vehicles that are just passing through, we're not making recommendations on that. And I will tell you, we did a pretty extensive analysis, and we're not showing you all of that. It's available if you need to see it and want to see it. But what we did was we took what we have that are eligible activities for us, and we looked at our vehicle mix. And these activities that we're making recommendations back to you, especially the first two, the local freight, the drayage, and the local freight, take up the biggest percentage of these types of vehicles in what we see here locally. So it's really keyed specifically to the region.
All right. Thank you, Mr.
I
Chairman.
would add, if I may, real quickly, too, we did look at the border crossings as an could we suggest money go there, for example? And because of the way they've structured their rules and regs, that doesn't apply. And so we had to focus back in on mobile
Yeah. There was some-
mobility.
there were certainly questions about that and whether we could use it for operations at the ports of entry.
Just a question on the strategic allocation in component 3, which talks about priority areas, allocation of the remaining funds to the priority areas on a strategic assessment of how to best use the funds to address the goals of the program. And you've got San Antonio with $42,500,000. Were they better prepared than we were?
The reason that they got more is because they are just now entering into a non-attainment status for ozone. And they did get a bigger piece of the pie because of that. They're actually now one of our competitors for CMAQ funds, a federal category that comes through us here. So that's the reason they ended up with a bigger piece of the pie.
Aside from the recommendation that you're asking for approval of today, is there some proactive steps that are going to be taken in order to actually get as much funds as we can to this community on those 5 areas that we are seeking funding for? Is there something that we can do?
Well,
That the MPO
it's
can do?
It's really what this all leads up to in the end. The executive director received the letter from TCEQ for a recommendation on how these funds should be, in our area, prioritized. So that's why we're bringing it back to you. Our action here today, your action here today, will be what is set up in the response back to TCEQ to help them figure out how to, in our area, better distribute those funds. So this, this is kind of that action or that step that we're making here. This plan is already in place, if you will. They're coming to us and asking us for our input, but there was multiple meetings. There was a public meeting here in El Paso. There were public meetings in all of these locations around the state. There's been a lot of activity as it relates to this. We sent out information on this, and there was opportunities for everybody to make comments from all the agencies and the public as well.
So does that mean that the decision as to how the funds are going to be distributed has already been made?
To some degree, what they're saying is they've given us these eligible activities, but they then come back to us and say, look, there's still the opportunity for you to provide input on that. So we think that there's still some ways that can be influenced, but I will say that in 2019, this grant process is going to start. And the next over the next 3 to 10 years, or up to 10 years, that process is supposed to play itself out. So if you take actually the amount of money we got here, it's not a very big amount, but I think our recommendation is to put it into the right place so that it does make the biggest impact for us in the future.
So if we can still influence on obtaining additional funding, is there some kind of plan?
No, there won't be any additional funding. If you go, well, I can't say that there won't be. I know Representative Pickett is saying that there's other things that are going on. And I will mention this, too. Aside from what you see on page 12 with this table, and it breaks out all the funding and the amount that we've got coming to our region, there's the zero emission vehicles facilities that has about $31.4 million that's also going to be eligible. We're not making a recommendation on that here today, and the reason is because that is not actually part of this plan yet. And when we get an opportunity to do that, I think what we need to do is concentrate on, and keep in mind, these are facilities. These are not zero-emission vehicles. We're not replacing vehicles. We're providing facilities for zero-emission vehicles. But we need to do an in-depth analysis to include environmental justice when we start looking at how those facilities should be set up. So there is more money. We already know there's $31.4 million, and that's statewide. So, when you divide that up between all of these areas here, it's not a whole lot. There probably will be some other funds, but what we see here right now is $169 million and a little over that is distributed between all of these areas. And our piece of that is only $16.8 million. So this is what they've given us to work with right now.
TCQ is holding some back because the state got a little bit more than that. It's not a big number overall, but when it's a new number, when it's new money, we kind of forget about all the other things that are out there. Because Roger mentioned something that's really important. San Antonio now is going to get to participate with CMAQ dollars. And before, that number was divided by the non-attainment areas, wasn't including San Antonio. So, I mean, this is important for us as well. And what I meant about the money, I'm not so thinking there's going to be a lot more. We just need to protect what it is we're recommending as good, solid projects so that somebody else doesn't say those were lame, because TCQ is going to make some changes. The numbers that are on that page 12 are going to change a little bit. Somebody's not going to be able to do one of the programs, or something's going to come up and they're going to move some money around, but as a state, we didn't get a lot. I don't think we got a lot out of the total dollar settlement that the feds did with VW. I don't think we got a lot. And I wanted to reiterate again, going back to the registrations, the reason that's a bad number for people to try to use against the division of monies are those persons who bought one of those vehicles is being made whole. So where an area says we had more registered diesel VWs in our community than you did in El Paso, we should get more of the money. They're making it sound like that those individuals were harmed monetarily, and aren't being taken care of. They are. I mean, VW is settling all those. So everybody who bought a vehicle is okay. That's why it's a bad argument to try to use against someplace, because if you look at what the goals are, the number one goal on page 3 says reduce NOx emissions. That's the number one goal for the money to be divided in Texas. So I think, again, support for this to TCQ outside of the MPO, comments to the governor's office, because the governor chose TCQ. It makes sense that they should administer the program, but you know the governor and his staff are gonna have input. And it's not unheard of to have the legislature make some comments coming up as well, because they haven't sent any of the money out.
So the action today is to request that we agree with this plan, except that we prefer a competitive process and not a first come, first served.
Correct.
But I understand, looking this over, is that this is already a final plan, input has already been concluded, so how, so how do we hold them accountable to a competitive process versus a first come, first served?
They're asking us to still, and you're right, it is their final plan, but they are looping back to all of these areas and asking for additional input. And they're asking that you can basically, you need to stay pretty much within the constraints, and if, you know, we want to make recommendations, they're saying that our voice will still be heard.
So with that said, we can ask for additional funding.
No. The amount you see here is the amount that we're being allocated. They're asking how what we could do, and this is something that went to the TPAC, the amount that we've got, we can ask to distribute it in a different way.
Okay.
Over these classes of vehicles. But the amount that we have right now, the 16.8, is the number.
And in terms of the action, I'm not seeing a priority in 1 through 5. Is there a priority of how they're recommending how we should ask for the distribution or the allotment of funds for each category?
We considered that. MPO staff did an analysis and came up with these same 5, but we tagged a number to those, and it was based on the ratio of that vehicle mix that we see in our area that we are aware of based on our modeling. But when you break it out like that and the percentage of these, it really comes down to a very small amount. For example, on a transit vehicle, you only get about $350,000 based on the proportion of those vehicles, and that won't even buy one bus. So what the TPAC came back with was just keep it simple, stay with the mobile source emissions, which is what we're responsible for, not to break it up into any specific amounts. But that is something that we could do.
Is 1 through 5 listed in priority?
It is. No, it is not a rank. It is simply the mobile source emissions. I can tell you what the percentage of those are based on our vehicle mix, but it is not a priority.
And I don't understand enough, and I may have missed it in your presentation, so if it's a competitive process, who's applying for the funding if they're government-owned vehicles? Is it that entity?
A school district could apply, for example,
Okay.
for school buses.
But they wouldn't come to the MPO, they would go directly to
They would directly apply for these through the grant process.
Okay, but we're just asking for these to be the priority area.
Right. We're saying that, you know, if for an MPO, this is what an MPO's priorities would be. You know, there's other ones that were there. Those were point source emissions, and these are the ones that we're looking at are mobile source emissions.
Okay, I understand now. Thank you.
And who notifies these entities that these funds are available, they should be applying, and helps them out with the process?
TCEQ will.
We have nothing to do with that.
It's really not, this is our role right now, as far as I know, is this. It will not necessarily come through the MPO for us to be making recommendations on how those funds are distributed.
But it behooves us to make this recommendation on their behalf ahead of time, if that makes
That's correct.
sense.
Yeah.
So what the MPO would be saying is, hey, we think a pot of money should be available for the ISDs to use for those buses.
which is included there.
And Roger, can I ask you just a kind of procedural, just curiosity question? The MPOs that are affected by this, have they already submitted recommendations, and do you know of any of them yet?
I don't think so. I think
'Cause
we're
I'm
all.
just curious how many of them are saying we want competitive versus first come, first served.
I think we're all in the same boat right now together. This came to us rather late. At the last policy board, I didn't even know about this. And the letter came directly to the executive director.
And it may just be informational wise, but could you reach out through
I
the
certainly can do that.
organization and ask the MPOs that are affected kind of what their policy's gonna be, what their action's gonna take, see if we're gonna be
Yes,
kind
sir.
of together on it?
I will. I will also warn you, though, that we have to have a response back to,
Not before, I know we need to take action today, but just so that we know whether there's a step 2 or step 3 to.
Sure.
To take,
Yes,
just
sir.
report back in January what the status
sir,
is.
Mr. Chairman.
Instead of trying to get it out, I mean, I can get it out of TCQ, I can ask them to respond
Yes, sir.
as they receive these too.
Yes, sir.
But just because there's an organization that you're a part of, if you
Yes,
just
sir.
kind of reach out.
Yes, sir.
Representative Blanco?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just going back to New Mexico, what did New Mexico receive in terms of, and then what's the plan for southern New Mexico?
Mr. Chair, honestly, at this point, I'm not aware. This is the first I've heard of it. I don't know if Jolene has been working with our planning section, but ultimately, I'm not aware.
I can reach out. Yeah. I can reach out to New Mexico Environmental Department.
I think that gives us a fuller picture of what the region will receive other than what El Paso itself is receiving.
Yes, sir.
At this moment, I would entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
I have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been seconded. Any other discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Item number 3, Executive Director's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 3 items here today. You've seen these before in the past. I just want to bring everybody up to speed. The congestion management process is something that came up in our federal certification review, and it's a major concern to the MPO, and that we make sure that we meet the federal requirements on how we move forward. And we're actually looking at how to program strategies that help us in alleviating our congestion, and it's not always just roadway. So there's other things that can go into this, for example, travel demand management and transit type strategies and operational strategies. So what the CMP is looking at is holistically multimodal. The MPO has been in very close coordination with the Texas A&M Transportation Institute, TTI, over the course of the last few months since the federal certification review in developing a new CMP, an updated, I should say updated. The CMP never stops. It's always moving. It's dynamic. But one of the issues that has come up with the El Paso MPO is that the CMP hasn't been kept up to date the way it should have been kept up to date. We have a 2013 CMP, and I will tell you that the 2013 CMP is still active, and we're implementing strategies from there. But we're bringing the Texas A&M Transportation Institute back in on December the 19th and the 20th next week, and they'll be working very closely with the El Paso MPO in how to move forward with updating the CMP. This is the second time that they've been here at our location working directly with staff, and they've also been here at the Transportation Policy Board a couple of months ago and provided training on what a CMP is and what needs to go into it. So we're working really closely with TTI, and what we're going to be looking at is the goals and objectives to start with, and if those goals and objectives are still the same that we have in the 2013 CMP, and I'll tell you now, they probably need to be updated. And what that means is we need to come back to this body here and look at what is it we're really trying to achieve. Now, we have goals and objectives that have been updated in our most recent Destino 2045 MTP, and those came directly from your input. So we'll be looking at how those match up and how those work as far as developing the next CMP. We need to look at the strategies that are in there, and you can see there's some of the strategies that I just mentioned, and we need to compare and contrast those and how that lines up with what the federal requirements are. We have not heard back from FHWA on our federal certification review, but this was the one big item that really was of concern, because they directly told the MPO that we are not meeting federal requirements. Since that time, the MPO has developed a report that went back to Federal Highway to demonstrate how we think that we actually are doing a better job than what was conveyed at the Federal Certification Review in meeting those federal requirements. We have not heard back from them. I've spoken directly with Mr. Leary from the Federal Highway Administration, and he has informed me that that is going to make a big difference in how they determine findings moving forward with the Federal Certification Review. So we'll be looking at those strategies. We'll also be looking at the congestion monitoring network itself. We'll be looking at where the issues are at, and along with that, we'll be looking at not just strategies, but what kind of projects might come out of those strategies to alleviate those issues. So those are a couple of the things that we'll be working with TTI next week when they're here. They'll be here all day on the 19th and the 20th. So we have expected full day of work with them. I need to let everybody know that TTI is not developing the CMP for us. That's not their responsibility. That's a responsibility of the MPO. What they're doing is they're providing us guidance and how we should be moving forward, and giving us the information that's important so that we are successful. The next thing is the conformity determination for New Mexico, the New Mexico portion of the El Paso MPO planning area. I'm throwing around a lot of dates here, but really what I'm trying to say is that we've been working closely with our federal partners, and specifically FHWA, and we're going back and forth with the pre-analysis consensus plan. The pre-analysis consensus plan sets the stage for the conformity report. And this is really what we need to have for this particular conformity determination, because we're not moving forward as the board has expressed. We're not amending our plan. We're not moving forward with projects. We're not moving forward with changing our MTP and our TIP and changing our model and developing new projects. We're developing a conformity report to show how we can meet the requirements to pass conformity in New Mexico. So the conformity document is it. The pre-analysis, the pre-consensus plan is the element, the plan, if you will, that sets that up. And we're going back and forth with FHWA. Was supposed to have received comments from them yesterday, and we didn't. Okay, so unfortunately, we're on a really tight timeline to meet what we've been trying to accomplish is that we get conformity by the August 3rd, 2019 deadline. And as you all know, as hard as we work here and bring the documentation to the policy board and give it to you for approval, we do not control the federal schedule. And the drive has been to work as hard as we can to get this document to you in January. That still requires 30 days of public involvement. So we are up against a couple of really tight deadlines. One, we need to get the pre-consensus plan approved. Actually, we need to get consensus on that plan. And then we take that plan and we incorporate what we've predetermined in there into the conformity document. And then the conformity document can go out for public review. But there's another element of that. We sent the travel demand model, baseline network, and forecast years to TTI for the emissions modeling on December the 7th. The return date for that is December the 21st. Actually, we asked for it prior to that, because December the 21st we'll be here over the holiday or whatever it takes, but that's the last day we're here to work on our regular schedule, and we can get the conformity document ready to go for a December 26th public involvement, if we receive it by the 21st. I'm supposed to hear today from TTI if they have confidence that they'll be able to have this done by the 21st. I've been in close coordination with a TPMP, that's a Texas TxDOT Transportation Planning and Programming Division, which basically TTI works for them to do the emissions analyses for all the MPOs in the state of Texas. And TPMP is indicating to me that it's still doable, but that TTI has a very tight time frame to get this done. So if we don't hear from on these two elements, the emissions modeling and the pre-consensus plan, it impacts our ability to develop the conformity report, and therefore impacts our ability to meet the 26th of December timeframe to start the 30-day public review, so that we can bring this back to you in January. We're not stopping, we're moving forward. There's still, we believe, there's confidence that this can be done. But I'm just letting you know that there's that possibility that if we don't get it, the public involvement started on the 26th of this month, we will not make that January timeframe to get that conformity document to you for approval. The reason January is so important, we've been trying to give it to our federal partners, the conformity document, with 6 months of review time. And there's no, like I said, there's no controlling their schedule. We coordinate with them, we work with them as hard as we can to get what we need to get. But the other thing that came out of the Federal Certification Review was that if we don't have this conformity by August the 3rd, 2019, we will go into a conformity lapse. A conformity lapse is a major deal. It's bigger than a conformity grace period, which is what we just came out of. A conformity lapse stops everything. There won't be any authorization of federal monies. Okay? It's not just that you can't amend your documents with the projects that are already there that can move forward. All of that will stop. So we're giving it to the Federal Highway Administration. We're hoping to, with 6 months of review time. Let me put that in perspective. The Horizon 2040 MTP, which was much more complicated because it included the TIP and the MTP and all of the things that happened with the modeling, took 11 months to get the federal portion. We did our work in 2 months. It took the Federal Highway 11 months to get it back to us. So our goal is to give this to them with the giving them the most time possible. If we lose a month, that hurts. So we're doing our best to get this to them in the January, get this back to you in the January timeframe.
So you didn't hear back from them yesterday. What actions did you take, or do you follow up with?
I will be following up with Federal Highway today. We gave them, they did not meet their deadline yesterday. I will tell you that I was at the TEMPO meeting, the Texas Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations, on Monday, and I spoke with Federal Highway then. They have comments that they're returning to us, and I asked them even if they could give us their draft comments at that time so that we could get a jump on it, but I wasn't able to receive the draft comments. I was then told that they would return the formal comments on the 13th. Did not receive them yesterday. So I will be following up with them today on that. And then as the other thing, TTI is supposed to get back with, or TPMP is supposed to get back with us on the modeling today.
And if we miss January 26th, and we don't have the response by then, I would urge you, Chairman Perea, to call a special meeting so that we're not waiting a whole month to get an approval, and it delays the process. We should really consider that.
Okay, and that is a good point to make. It all depends on when we can start public involvement. And where we start public involvement, then we need to have 30 days before we can come back to this body. Okay, so we'll definitely be looking at that in the timeline. And then there's also, I need to point it out, and it has come up here at the policy board a couple of times. This is in New Mexico, where we have a new ozone conformity issue. The Texas conformity process, is, if you will, is going through TTI, and it's at no cost to the MPO or any of the MPOs in Texas. And that's administered by TxDOT through TPMP. This one's got its own issues because this is a New Mexico non-attainment. But the way I'm interpreting that this is not a New Mexico issue, this is a regional issue. This is an El Paso MPO issue. Okay, so I'm working very hard, and I've been in contact with Mr. Doolittle concerning the issue here, and we're trying to get all the everything worked out to make sure that we can follow the normal process, and that this is taken care of the way it always is for Texas MPOs, just like we are, even though this is an issue that's going on in the New Mexico portion of our MPO planning area. So I think I've covered everything there that we need to cover, if you have any questions.
Any other questions?
What happens when Trump shuts down the government? Do we get a grace period?
And lastly, we didn't have training today. I didn't set up the training for December because it takes a lot of work ahead of time, and we just didn't know how December was going to play out. And we had training in October and November, and in January we'll be bringing back training before the policy board meets. TTI and TPMP will be here providing training to the TPB, and this will be on the basics of conformity, basically the foundation of everything that we're talking about here for conformity purposes, which is what we have to deal with as a non-attainment area. And they will talk about a couple other things, the state implementation plan. This is where our budgets are set by the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. And they'll talk about some optional tests where you don't have a budget, like what we're doing right now with New Mexico. There's no budget in the SIP. So we're having to develop our own tests, which has already gone through the process of a consultative group, and they have agreed on the process that we're going to use, and it's called a less than baseline test. So they will be here to give you an update on how all of that works and provide training, which is good for your training hours in January.
Yes, sir.
Roger, any training hours available for the December 19th and 20th Texas A&M training?
I don't know if that would be considered training hours or not. What it is really is more staff digging in and looking at the things that we have done in our current CMP and the modeling. We'll be upstairs looking at the models, and we'll be also then opening up the 2013 CMP and looking at the strategies and the things that are in there. Like now, see the CMP has already been a training that was here in October, and it was available to the Transportation Policy Board for training hours.
All right, thank you.
Seeing none, would you like to take a report?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, status of FM 1110.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Jose Landeros with the County of El Paso. There's been some updates regarding to FM 1110. A couple of weeks ago, the MPO was notified by TxDOT that some issues that had been previously identified with the environmental document for the project had been further looked into, revised, and at this point, the environmental document, which was not thought to have previously been valid, has actually been determined to be, there was approved in time with our previous plan, and so as a result, the county is coordinating with the district and the MPO and FHWA on this project moving forward, and recognizing that the conformity determination is a pretty significant component of the work that is going on here at the MPO. We won't bring anything back to the board until the Commissioners Court has had a chance to review the options related to bringing the project back to the MPO to add back to the planning documents. And we've been able to coordinate through some of the logistical questions that we have with both the district and the MPO staff. So just wanted to provide that update to the board, as the MPO did receive that letter from TxDOT earlier this month. Happy to take any questions related to the project.
Seeing none. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, we're coming to the conclusion here. The next meeting for the TPB is going to be on January 25th at 9 a.m. Maybe. And again, we welcome Dr. Morgan to the TPB, and
5-minute speech.
and hopefully everyone has a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Do I have a motion to adjourn? There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Motion has been seconded. All those in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. Motion carries.